Welcome back to the Zeitcast. My name is Jonathan Martin. I'm so glad that you're here. Uh, Let me give you a little context for what's happening right now. I want to talk to you about misinformation and disinformation. There's a lot of both, and especially in this run up to the election, it's coming at us. All the noise, all the voices, all the images are coming at us on an unprecedented level. It's a lot to metabolize. It's too much to metabolize. Nobody has ever tried to take in this much information before. And I want to say, before I say anything else, that I feel like most of us, and I do believe there's such a thing as bad actors, but I think most of us are trying to do the right thing, trying to do the best we can with whatever information that we have. And it's overwhelming. I want to be as clear and direct as I know how to be because it's overwhelming. We are overstimulated. Our brains are overtaxed. We feel the effects and the implications in our bodies. And I think so many of us legitimately don't know how to sort fact from fiction. How do you know? How do you know in a sea of conspiracies, of so many voices, that some might seem more credible than others for all kinds of reasons? Our brains are just scrambled so much right now. So part of the reason why I'm doing a lot right now, and I know that I'm doing a lot. Y'all, in addition to being director of the Center for Spiritual Life at DePaul, pastor of a beautiful rural Methodist church, my family's spread out across 2 states. I'm in Oklahoma right now, so I'm much more sane when I get to be with Nicole and the kids. That's really good for my own soul. But the reason that I'm putting out so much content so quickly, I don't know another way to say it. There's not a pitch. There's not a product. There's not some kind of big ask. I have never felt this level of desperation. I've never felt this level of just some kind of a catalyst in here that I've got to be out here saying these things. And I'm very slow to attribute things to something divine or the Holy Spirit or like whatever. It just feels like something I have to do. So I hope any of this stuff is helpful. I will tell you that coming up the next few days and weeks, you will not even believe. You will not even believe the folks who are coming on and coming around. My good friend Brian Zahn is joining me for chat tomorrow. Literally one of my favorite singers of all time. I can't do it yet. I'm not even trying to tease. I can't do it. I can't say it out loud yet. But I'll be having a conversation with possibly my favorite non-Bono singer of all time next week. All kinds of things are happening. But specifically in these couple weeks, I really felt like I needed to focus specifically on disinformation, to speak against disinformation. Mostly these are on Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on YouTube. As it turns out, some of you know, you're probably still here. I've been sick, and unfortunately, sometimes the mornings right now, I hack all the way through, and best intentions, I just felt too bad and sounded too nasty to jump on this morning. So I want to, April understands, yes, my favorite non-Bono singer. You know it. Some of my friends know shorthand what these things mean. So I, especially since right now a lot of these are on YouTube and there's a lot of focus on YouTube, I thought, since I'm not doing the morning thing, I want to jump on with my Instagram friends, see how you're doing. But you may be watching or listening now by any and all kinds of means. Let's just get right to this. I am deeply suspect in general when people try to give me keys to anything. I'm suspect of the ideas of keys. I'm suspect towards the idea that there are skeleton keys to the universe. I'm suspect of life hacks that make things too simple. Nicole and I have a bit of a ongoing joke between us because the gentleman who does the keys to the election and is sort of a social scientist, and then I say that it's pseudoscience and it's more like wizardry and it doesn't really work, and we spar about this in a fun way. Y'all can feel free to weigh in the comments. I'm being pretty light about that, but I'm suspect of the ideas of keys. I generally don't like it when I feel like people lay out for me in the spirit of, do you remember the Nicolas Cage National Treasure films? I love Nicolas Cage. I think he is a gift. He is a gift. I have Nick Cage. Y'all will think I'm overrating. Not far under Brando for me. In terms of person, like who do I love? Like I love the wildness and the quirkiness and the fierceness that is Nicolas Cage. I adore him. I hate the National Treasure movies. I absolutely hate them. And part of what I hate about them so much is this whole idea, it's all felt so hokey to me, this sort of like, oh, let's dig under the Washington Monument, and then you see a pyramid, and then you'll see this other thing. And it's just like that whole way of looking at life and the world generally does not have appeal to me. Nicole is telling me right now to lay off her sweet election guru. It generally does not appeal to me. But that being said, if I have master keys, if I have keys to the universe, if I have keys that I feel like will unlock your soul, I'm going to give you the keys today, because it does feel a little bit like that. It could feel like a little too high concept in that way, and yet I think it's really simple, and I think it's legitimate. Is what you're going to hear far out in conspiracy theory? You see what you think. I just want to lay the groundwork this way. So when we think about evil, and especially for those of us who are people of faith, for those of us who come to the Christian tradition, what do you think of when you think about evil? Any of you, what do you think of when you think about evil? Do you think of a red horned figure like that kind of Satan? These ideas recur throughout traditions. I love the TV show Evil, by the way. I hope it gets picked up somewhere else. But Evil, kind of between X-Files and The Exorcist, Evil does great stuff with this because it plays with sort of demonology, but also the way, because one of the characters is Muslim, the idea of jinn. So in Islam, you have jinn function the same way that demons do in Christianity. I mean, so many mythologies and religions across the centuries really have had some version of evil embodied in some kind of form, or in some cases disembodied. So I don't know what you think of when you think about evil, but I want to take you on a bit of a trajectory here. So for Christians in the New Testament, Paul in Ephesians 2:2 refers to Satan, it would seem, this demonic figure that is the embodiment of evil in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible, as the prince of the power of the air. So I want you to sit with that phrase, the prince of the power of the air. There are different ways to think about ancient people and their views, and there are a whole lot of folks, of course, whether they're reading anything in Christian scripture or throughout any sort of ancient script or tradition, will say like, yeah, these people are all washed up. They just didn't have science yet. They didn't know anything about how the world works. But I want you to consider this. Prince of the power of the air. I am not saying necessarily, because I don't know that this is the way things work. I'm not saying that the Apostle Paul in this case or somebody else is sitting around and they're imagining Wi-Fi and the internet and radio signals before that, and TV. I'm not saying they're necessarily imagining that and that that's what they're speaking directly to, but I do think there's sometimes that ancient peoples in general have a way of naming primal realities in a way that almost makes too much sense. The prince of the power of the air. If there's such a thing as evil, if there is a force of evil in the world that's greater than the sum of its parts, where does it exist? How does it exist? How does it have being? In the air. It's in the air. It's around us. And it certainly takes on whole different kinds of meaning. It takes on new shades of meaning in a time where there's Wi-Fi and we're literally picking these things up in the air. And there's a way that it's kind of in the atmosphere. I can be in any city, great city in the world, and pull up my phone or my laptop, and I am connected to infinite voices because of the power of the air, if you think about it that way. Here is a fun pop quiz for you. What's the first appearance of Satan in the Old Testament? Anybody want to say? I think the first instinct for a lot of people would be to say Genesis 3, where we have this mention of the serpent. But keep in mind that the text does not specifically say that the serpent is anything like Satan or the devil. The identity of the serpent in Genesis 3 remains ambiguous, and people project things back onto that text over time. But the first appearance of Satan proper in the Hebrew Bible actually is in the book of Job. And what we see is we see this character of Ha-Satan. Ha-Satan it is in Hebrew. Ha-Satan is not a surname. It's not Bob. So it's not like it's not like there's a red man with a tail named Bob who's going around. I'm saying that's not the idea in Job. Who's going around to kids and saying, "Hey, you want to go smoke out behind the school? Hey, you want to come look at some porn? Hey, you want to get drunk and high on the weekend?" That's not the notion. But what we do have of the Ha-Satan, it's not a surname, but it is an office. And the Satan, Ha-Satan, the Satan, is the accuser. His role is in a courtroom. It's all court-like imagery. And what we see about the Satan in Job is that Satan is the one who's bringing these almost legal accusations. It's forensic, right? It's judicial language. He's bringing legal accusations against people. And so the embodiment of evil, for the first reference we get of Satan in the Hebrew Bible, literally defined as the accuser. So hold on to those things. In Ephesians, the prince of the power of the air, which at least gestures, would at least give us some kind of framework to think about where and how evil operates in the atmosphere, crackling in the atmosphere. Have you ever noticed in the account of the Gospels, Christians always reflect on this once they get into Easter, the way that the week before the Passion, that Jesus rides into Jerusalem and people are saying, "Hosanna, Hosanna." But then a week later, people are shouting out, "Crucify him, crucify him." What is that? What is the shift? There is an energy of accusation that when it's let loose in a crowd, there is an energy of accusation that is powerful. Y'all, it's power. It's power. But it is not wonder-working power. It's a very different kind of power. And I think this is part of the reason why it's difficult to discern these different kind of voices that we hear. It's difficult to discern light from darkness. It's difficult to discern because I think that accusation has such a primal force to it. When you expel someone else from the community, when you're able to place all your blame on the shoulders of somebody that you don't like or you think their views are wrong, there's a way that you cleanse yourself on somebody else. And there is something like that feels like salvation. It feels like saving grace. It feels sanctifying in a way because you're clean. You get clean at somebody else's expense. So there's a real reason why when people are in a group setting or maybe even a large group of people online or whatever, that when the energy of accusation is let loose, and now, speaking of keys, placing the blame, placing the weight, all the shame, on all the guilt on one person or in a small group of people means that I'm off the hook for any sense of responsibility, any kind of my own ambiguity, all of my own issues. Man, it feels like a miracle. It feels like purging. And it's one of the reasons why I'm convinced, and I'm really free flying right now. It's one of the reasons why I'm convinced that the most powerful force in the world, the most powerful forces in the world, are always going to be closest in proximity to the truth. Because I think we're hungry for a kind of salvation. I think we're hungry for a kind of cleansing. We need our consciousness and our psyches. We want to be purged in some way. And if there's a simulation of that purging that feels like righteousness, it feels like righteousness because then we feel more righteous when it's over. We feel better about ourselves. Goodness, it is exactly its proximity to the real that makes it so uniquely dangerous. And it's why it's easy then for people to commandeer the imagery, the language, the symbols of religion, and to use them in ways that are just like a little bit devious, just a little bit off. And it can have such tremendous force and power because it does tap into a kind of spiritual power. But that doesn't mean that the power is good. Doesn't mean that the power is right. The fact that it is powerful, the fact that it's powerful in a room, the fact that it's powerful online, the fact that it picks up traction easily, the fact that it moves from person to person easily. Did anybody see the 1997 thriller called Fallen with Denzel Washington? Does anybody remember this? Where the idea is that there's a demon that literally moves from person to person through touch. And you always hear the Rolling Stones song. I've never heard that song again the same way since. Time is on my side. no place singing right now. Yes, it is. Thank you, John Mace remembers the film. And there's the best scene in that movie. It's so creepy. Is like the demon is all of a sudden moving rapidly from one character to the next on a street because people just keep touching each other. So you can't outrun it because just gives one person, the next person, like whatever. I actually think that it's a pretty profound image for how evil works, is that when the contagion is released in the air, right? When there is this kind of, I might do a separate thing on René Girard, the French philosopher, social critic, at some point, because I think there's a lot of good in Girard, but there's a lot of ways that Girard is used in harmful ways. But I think Girard really gets this right. Scapegoating is powerful. Having an other to scapegoat is a really powerful force when it is let loose. So think about the world that we live in now. Prince of the power of the air, the Christian New Testament. Ha-Satan, the accuser in the Old Testament. And think about how these forces converge. Now, accusation is magnified in the air. It picks up traction easily. It's literally all around us. Accusation, accusation, accusation. Whenever you need to fix, whenever you hit a dopamine, whenever you need to feel better about yourself or your group or your people being the in group, it's literally all around us. What I want to do now, though, and this is where I want to land for the next few minutes that we have, is I want to get real preachy with it. Got my Wesley Study Bible right here, and I am going to go to Mark chapter 5. Y'all can feel free to fact check anything that you like. But I want to see what you do with this and see if you feel like I'm getting too I'm getting too conspiratorial. Nicole says, when this sense of self-righteousness leads a strong group identities, it becomes an even harder spell to break. That's so true. That's so true. And these things do tap to identity questions. The issue of identity and the question of identity and how we are named and what names us is the absolutely central function of this text. So this is from Mark chapter 5, and I'm just going to read a bit to you if that's all right with y'all. Mark 5:1 says, they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain, for he had often been restrained with shackles and chains. But the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Now, what we know about this man out of the gate is that he's the person who's under the spell of an evil spirit. And I want you to really see here now, to get a little more granular, how in the New Testament text, how it is that evil works, and how can we tell, how can we know when something's evil? You have a person that's literally living without constraint. There is no self-control. He's self-destructive. There's nothing that can rein him in. He can't be pulled back. He lives among the tombs. Fundamentally, intrinsically, I don't think anybody consciously chooses to live amongst the tombs. Nobody wants to live among death. Who chooses death? Well, you can choose to live among death. When the voices in your head get so loud, and when you start to yield to them in such a way to where now it's like, you can try anything, you try all sorts of programs, you read things, but at the end of the day, it feels like you're so out of control. You've kind of yielded the controls. You've let go of the levers to yourself. Somebody else is kind of pulling those, or something else is pulling those. To where now this is a person who's really not operating out of conscious thought. He's not operating out of reason. There's something in him that keeps him in the tombs, that keeps him not just kind of running around, but unable to be subdued. Nothing else that he encounters is strong enough to hold that thing down. Shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Verse 5, night and day among the tombs and the mountains, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. Now again, who chooses to bruise themselves? Well, there's something about this self-destructive spirit that's so kind of nihilistic, that's so out of control, that self-harm becomes the only alternative. you almost wonder what this person is, whatever this unclean spirit is whatever this torment that he lives with. Is it so awful that he has no alternative now except to hate his own body, to hate his own soul? He lashes out towards himself. Jay, you're skipping ahead of the text. He said, I feel bad for the pigs. But it's like there's this thing inside him that's just lashing out. Maybe just not to hurt anymore. Maybe not to feel this thing anymore. Maybe not to feel so driven anymore, because it's exhausting. So when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and he bowed down before him and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." Now this gets really interesting to me because this is a person who's living in torment. He's living in torment. Cannot shut off the voices in his mind. Can't turn the dials down. Self-destructive, bruising, cutting himself with stones, howling day and night. Nobody can subdue him. And yet what he says to Jesus, who in all of these texts is the one who brings calm, who calms the storm, who little children come freely to him. Jesus is always like this stabilizing force. Jesus is always the one that seems to bring people into reality. And yet what he says in the presence of good is, do not torment me. Because when you are given over to a force outside of yourself, then when sanity comes in the room, when peace comes into the room, when love comes into the room, it feels like torment. It feels like death. I'm not going to talk about hell right here. How is it possible that love could feel like torment? How is it possible that the love of God even could feel like a violation? Well, when you're given over to kind of self-destruction, yes, even the purest love stepping into the room still feels violent to you. So his response to the one who would cease all of those voices, who would bring calm in the midst of the storm, is, don't torment me. Because he's so used to the way that he's living. He's so used to the way that he's thinking. It's become so normal for him to be howling in the tombs and to be completely out of control that control would feel like violence. Peace would actually feel violent to him. But then it gets really interesting. For he had said to him, Jesus said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Come out. That's not the man talking. That's the Spirit talking through him. And he replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Now, I want to really sit with that word for a minute. There was a TV show, Legion, a few years ago. I think Noah Hawley was involved with that. I want you to think about the phrase legion. Legion here now brings in it's very specific language, very specific terminology from the Greco-Roman world. A legion, and this has got to be intentional. A legion is formally a way of counting. It's a kind of troop within the Roman army, right? Those themes are not unclear in the Gospel of Mark or otherwise. That the idea in even using the phrase legion, which is the way you describe this segment, this host of troops in a Roman army, is Rome, keep in mind, is dominating the Jewish people, right? They're dominating ancient Palestine. So there's very much this gesture towards the Roman occupation. Rome has clamped down on everyone. The legion, in a very real way, is controlling everything, right? So there's this way that the state, in that regard, is kind of controlling everything. But he says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Now, that's not the man's name. That's the Spirit who's answering through him. My name is Legion, for we are many. Without wanting to get overly preachy, I really wonder for some of you right now, if I were to ask you, what is your name? What's your name? Hi, Andy. Hi, John. Hi, Richard. Hi, April. We have names, but what is your name? Who are you? Who are you really? Who are you past the small talk? Who are you past the kind of things that we say at parties? Who are you past the things that you talk about when you're, passing somebody else in the office or at school or whatever. Like who are you? Like who are you really? I wonder how many of us, rather than having a quick resonant answer to be able to say I am and to be able to say our names, I wonder if a more truthful response would be something like, my name is Legion, for we are many. Now, I'm not going to try to do, because I'm going to freak you out, my best impression of kind of an exorcist demon speaking through you like kind of voice. And I'm not making fun of that, but I think that can be like a little too cartoony. I mean, think about this. We are people that have an unprecedented amount of access to all kinds of voices. And in a way, we're just constantly giving away chunks of our soul. We have all kinds of people who are telling us who we are. And the prince of the power of air, the prince of the power of the air, right? Satan, the accuser. So much of what we're hearing is accusation, sometimes against us, sometimes against people around us. Normally it's towards our neighbor in some regard or another. So we're just full of these voices. And after a certain amount of time, it becomes so oppressive. It becomes so real. Like this stuff is so right in front of us at all times. It's almost like it's all that we are. It's almost like there's not a voice beneath all the other voices to answer. The man can't answer for himself. He can't say who he is because he's so under the domination of all of these spirits. And part of the strangeness of this, of course, is that if you have a legion inside, if you have a legion of voices, then they can be pulling in all kinds of opposite directions. I think about this all the time, but it's sort of like right now, because I think I am seeing a lot of evil in the world, is how chaotic it is. I mean, like, it's really, really like chaotic. It's just chaotic. I'll give you a very real-time example. So I'm thinking about in a certain segment of the population right now, there are a number of thought leaders, a number of these kind of right-wing thinkers who say things that are not just anti-Semitic. I mean, they're right out of the Hitler playbook. I'm not naming names, people like Fuentes and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson right now. I mean, saying things that are like, wow, like Hitler playbook, like this is the darkest and like most devious kind of anti-Semitism, and it's full blast. And the same people who say that, like right alongside them, are folks that if anyone criticizes the Netanyahu regime for absolutely anything at all, will say, oh, that's anti-Semitism. You can't be anti-Semitic. And you think, how is it possible for those same voices to kind of reside inside the same body? People that literally are saying things that started a Holocaust, things that actually justified the extermination of Jews, who then also are saying, oh, like, hey, you can't criticize this nation state, or else if you do that, then you're being anti-Semitic. Well, a legion does not have to be consistent in some ways, because what happens is there's a way that instinct just takes over. Desire is all that you are. Christians have done an awful lot of work, haven't they, to warn against all kind of desires. But don't you understand there's a difference between the kind of normal ways that humans desire and when desire so overtakes you, where there's such like an animal instinct, there's such an impulse to it, to where it's just more like, this is so ridiculous. I've never said this in my life. I'm thinking about Beavis and Butthead right now. I'm literally thinking about Beavis and Butthead. It's going, fire, fire, fire. It's like sort of like there's just you fixate on a word and you just kind of keep saying it to yourself over and over again. And there's such a strong need to be an us. And we know that we have an us because there is a them, right? It's so primal that then people can kind of say at the same time, like, they can tell us anti-Semitic things and also say, like, don't be anti-Semitic, and like, yes, because in every case, like, there's always somebody on the out. There's still like someone to blame, and at the end of the day, our souls feel really clean and really righteous because we just know that we're not them. At least I'm not that guy. At least I'm not like them. That energy is really powerful, but it's really confusing. And I think so many people right now have so many of these voices inside them that are so dominant and they're so loud, and they're disorienting. And listen, I want to say this, like, not putting anything on in terms of empathy. Like, I feel this. Most people really want to do the right thing and really are trying to do the right thing with their lives, but they legitimately just don't know what to believe. They don't know what to believe. And between kind of all the memes and the video clips and the podcasts and all the kind of information that's hitting us kind of at equal volume and equal strength, How can you discern that? My name is Legion, for we are many. So the really sad thing about this is that you can have so many voices inside of it. You can internalize this so much to where you really and honestly forget who you are. Like you really and truly do not know. You just don't know. I always love to say about Jesus, and I believe this for a long time, I always believe it. There are so many ways that we are not like Jesus. There's so many ways that Jesus is unique, that Jesus is particular in the Christian story. But one thing that's not unique about Jesus, I mean, because keep in mind that we're all called to be sons of God, like joint heirs with Christ. God calls Jesus God's beloved. That's the voice that Jesus hears when he's baptized in the River Jordan by John. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. And I believe that belovedness, that was not unique to Jesus. Jesus came to show us that. Jesus came to show us that we are all the beloved of God. We are all beloved sons, beloved daughters. We're all beloved children of God. And, Henri Nouwen has this great quote that one of the great tragedies of human life is that we're always forgetting who we are. Well, Jesus, unlike us, never forgot who he was. He always knew who he was. So no matter what's happening, when he's in the wilderness and he's facing the accuser there, or when the crowds are cheering, crucify him, there's never a moment where Jesus forgets who he is. What I think happens to us all the time now is that the voices are so loud and they're so dominant and they're swirling at all times to where we just don't know who we are. Belovedness is not our identity. We don't know that we are God's beloved. We don't really know who we are at all because the voices are conflicting. The impulses are competing, and it can feel like all we are is a collection of firing synapses that are just all going in different directions, and we just don't know. We don't know who we are. To where somebody asks you, like, who are you? Or maybe even ask you, like, how are you? We don't even really know how to answer that because really all that we are at this point is a reflection of those other voices. I can tell you what songs I listen to. I can tell you what podcasts I listen to. I can tell you what media I appreciate and enjoy, but I don't really know who I am under the rubble of all of this anyway. And can I just say to you, and again, try not to be like too preachy with it, but can I just say to you, that's not how you were intended to live. That you're intended to live from a deep sense of identity. You're designed not just to be, first and foremost, to be a human being, but to know who you are in your deepest and truest self. There's supposed to be a part of you that's not able to be rattled. There's supposed to be a part of us that's calm and clear and crisp and able to discern. And the Psalms talks about humans being made a little lower than the angels. We are created in the image of God, and what that means is that we are created with the capacity to create and to make and to give life and to be life-giving people. But when we're under the dominion of all of these voices all the time, and they pull at you all the time, and you don't even know what to believe anymore. You don't know. You just don't know. You don't know the difference between fact and fiction. Can I say something without any judgment? I can't stress enough how much this is without judgment. And I'm going to do my best to not say this in a way that's funny at all, because I'm not only trying to not to punch down. I just don't want to punch out in any direction. I've seen this thing in the last few years, and some of you know what I'm talking about, but I feel like hear anybody talk about this. I've been around a lot of Christians who've gone through some sort of deconstruction, if that's not the best term. Use whatever terms you want. They have gone through significant life alteration in terms of their beliefs. And I'm not a person who's afraid of that and thinks that kind of reinvention is often necessary until your beliefs are stripped down to the nub. You don't really get to even choose your own life. So I'm not against any of that. But you know what I've seen happen a lot? There seems to be this pretty direct pipeline to where people will lose a sense of faith, and then they kind of start experimenting, and next thing you know, they don't really have a sense of scaffolding. They don't really have a sense of scaffolding. So they don't replace the old practices with new practices. They're not quite clear who they are. They come from a world where there's a lot of certainty, where there's not just clarity, too much clarity, like certainty, where everything was black and white and clear. Now they're living without any scaffolding at all. And so then the next thing you know, it becomes kind of like, well, maybe I need to explore all these other kinds of things. And those things aren't necessarily wrong in and of themselves. But it's like they continue this path where there's not any kind of scaffolding. So you kind of go from being a Jesus person to it's the universe, it's whatever kind of witchery, sorcery, like whatever, just like kind of all the things. And what I find is that there's this pretty direct pipeline at this point that a lot of people will abandon some kind of what they feel like is more traditionalistic, moralistic Christian faith to kind of be out here in no man's land. And next thing you know, shockingly, bang, they end up becoming fundamentalists all over again. Maybe all the way back to the same kind of fundamentalism. Do y'all know? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Like they go from like all this certainty and clarity to saying F it, throwing up the middle finger and all that. And then they come all the way back around to it full circle. And I'm convinced that part of what happens there is that it's like, it's not that it's wrong to have this deep inquisition of your own faith and belief system. There might be some things that really need to be replaced, but if it's not replaced with anything, one of the things that we see in these gospel narratives when Jesus exorcises demons is that it happens a few times, right? This notion that if that's not replaced with something else, that different side, same coin, that's it. It's the same thing. Do you not see it's the same thing? There's such a deep, desperate sense for identity, for knowing. There's such a deep sense for clarity that then it's kind of like you don't really deconstruct that. You don't really get past that. You think you are, but it's kind of superficial. So then you end up kind of going back to the same thing all over again. It's really kind of, it's much more the same than it is different. So when people lose any sense of scaffolding, right? And I get it, especially when new keys to the universe, that's it. Especially when fear has been what's gotten you out of the driveway for all of your life. Why would I do anything if not for fear of eternal conscious torment, hell, rapture, like all things? When fear has been the thing that's motivated your whole life, if that's not replaced with something else, if that's not replaced with, does it sound too sentimental and cliche, if that's not replaced with love, if you don't find new reasons to get out of bed, if you don't find new reasons to keep one foot in front of the other, if you don't find a new center of meaning in this way, well, the alternative, I'm afraid, is that you end up with a legion of competing centers of value and meaning. Does anybody hear what I'm talking about right now? Yeah, beliefs are different, Nicole said, but held the same way. That's it. And I think what often happens is that there's this season then that people go through where now suddenly the old thing is replaced with 1,000 new things. But what really has got lost is any kind of sense of coherent self. Like you just don't know. You just don't know who you are. You don't know what you believe. You don't know what you think. You are not, there is nothing more to you in a way than just being able to repeat back what all the other voices are saying. But you don't really know what you think or how you think or why. I don't know how in this age any of us can get by without learning, without trying to study something about algorithms and knowing how they work. That, you Google one thing one day and next thing you know, it's just being fed to you. And confirmation bias. That seems like the Holy Spirit. This must be God. It's like I'm running into this idea everywhere now. It must be a good idea. I mean, this must be what everybody's doing. Maybe this is what God's trying to show me. And we don't understand that it's not miraculous. It's the algorithm. And the algorithms dominate us. The algorithms is a scream. Where it's almost like, what a tragic picture of a human being. Who are you? What's your name? My name is Legion, for we are many. All I can tell you is to repeat back what the algorithm says, to repeat back what the algorithm has given to me. Gosh, it's why these questions of media literacy and how we discern are so crucial right now. Because inevitably, the voices that we listen to, of course, they're going to tell us who we are. They're going to tell us what we are. They're going to tell us how to find meaning. They're going to tell us how to be in the world. And that's promising in a way, right? Maybe somebody will tell me something good. Maybe somebody will tell me something important that I've not heard before. But what if instead I just end up kind of like a bunch of fireflies in the jar, It's like they kind of light up a little bit, but nothing's really connected. And all it is like the impulse is fire. Again, synapses fire, but we don't We don't have any idea coherently who we are or what we are. Does that sound bleak? Does that sound desolate? Well, let me, in these last couple moments, let me hopefully take this to a place that's slightly less desolate. So some of you know where this story has been going. My name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged Jesus earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirits begged him to send us into the swine, let us enter them. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. Because see, those voices, they're so self-destructive, even maybe in a way the pigs have more sense to run to the sea than to live under domination of that. I say that with real empathy. This is part of how I really believe and why I really believe so many people are living in hell right now. Because think about this. All of us have desires. All of us have impulses. But if you get to the place to where firing impulses is kind of all you've got left, all you know is that I want this right now. I want that right now. I think this right now. I just heard this. I just heard that. And to where it's just, because see, again, I don't know what I believe about the nature of evil in this way, or of the Satan. Like, is evil sentient? Again, Satan's not a surname, it's an office. I don't know if it's like a guy named Bob except his name happens to be Satan, and he's coming up with devious schemes. What I know is that the nature of evil is fragmented and fractured. And so I think what evil actually looks like in anybody's life is something a lot less coherent than like, hey, I used to follow Jesus, and now I've given my life to Satan. And it's much more like confusion. It's much more like, I don't know who I am because the voices are swirling around. It's much more like, I know I get hungry, I know I get sleepy, I know I get thirsty, I know I want to have somebody close, but I also hate everybody. It's just, it's just incoherent. The nature of evil is to be fragmented and fractured. In classical Christian thought, we would say that evil only exists as a parasite to the good. It's parasitic to the good. So it's not new, it's not original, it's not creative. It's almost like the cosmic residue of what's good, what's living on the underside. And what's actually there is not really coherent. It's not thoughtful. All the great Carmen songs I know, you get the idea that Satan is consciously scheming against Jesus, until getting in the ring for 3 rounds with Jesus, then he loses to the champion, or Satan bite the dust, or like whatever. But I think oftentimes, like, evil is just what evil really looks like. This might sound light. I don't mean it to be. I kind of mean the opposite. What evil actually looks like and sounds like, it's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. It's non-meaning. It seems trivial. But what's not trivial is when you have so many different voices, so many different conflicting values, so many different conflicting centers of meaning, that the tide carries you all the way out, and you have no idea who you are. You have no idea what your name is. You have no idea what you really think. You have no idea what you really believe. You have no idea what you really want, because all you have is the voices that tell you what to want, that tell you what to think, that tells you what somebody else thinks, that tells you what somebody else thinks is cool. It's just endless, to where then that wonderful sense we get in the Psalms of being fearfully and wonderfully made, that we are handcrafted and we are particular, and there's all kinds of life inside of us, and there's all this capacity to critique Jason Karma catching strays. Karma maybe is catching strays a little bit. It's just, it's just overwhelming. But I can't stress enough that I really believe that what evil looks like in real life is mostly pedestrian. It's mostly ordinary. And it's usually not people's heads turning around 360 and green vomit coming out. Although I'm not exactly debunking that, I'll save this for another time. M. Scott Peck, who's been gone for a long time, but Scott Peck, this is his conversion story, is that as a clinical psychologist, that he felt like in his therapeutic practice, he kept coming into contact with a kind of evil that seemed to be greater than the sum of the parts, in a way that ultimately led him to faith. And so in 1980, he writes People the Lie, where he's glimpsing this. In like 2004, he wrote a book called Glimpses of the Devil, in which he's actually giving documented accounts of people who had been demon possessed, which he believes is very rare and not what happens mostly like in society, but does believe, yeah, there is a way that people kind of give themselves over to evil in a way that he does believe has some kind of supernatural properties to it that transcend the natural world. Nicole, whoever you are out there, Nicole, is am I saying your name right? Asked a great question. How do we resist these forces in the air without succumbing to them ourselves? And I think that's the real question, is that whatever it is that overwhelms us, whatever it is that, because I mostly just want to scream at everyone all the time. Indeed. Whatever it is that overwhelms us, whatever it is that overcomes us, inevitably our inclination is going to be fight fire with fire, right? Of course we want to do that. The voices are screaming at us, so we want to scream at others. The voices are blaming some people, so we need to blame like someone else. Yes, Savannah, I did see your text popping up, by the way. That's really awesome. Yeah, this is why I wasn't responding. Yeah, it's like that's going to be true for any of us, is that as we, it's going to be in our nature now, because we become a reflection of the voices. We become a reflection of the voices to where it's all that we are. So when we are constantly under the domination of that kind of energy, what else do we have in us to give? How else would we fight? How else would we know how to resist? And it's why it is. Note that this is always true even in antiquity. And right now I know I'm not being conspiratorial. Now I know I'm saying not just what's in the Bible. You'll get this in any form of great literature, is that anybody who experiences some kind of like enslavement or torture or captivity or goes through something really hard, of course, if they get power later on, of course there's always going to at least be a really significant temptation for them to use that in the world in unhealthy ways, because it's the only form of power they've known. It's all that they've seen work. And this is what I meant. Savannah, I was literally preaching to them the thing that we had just been talking about the other day, in terms of this thing about how a lot of people that come from really intense religion, that's like really high control and everything, there's like system and structures and the lines in terms of behavior. It's all like so clear how they reject that in radical ways, as far as they know how to reject. I'm going to become a Satan worshiper. I'm going to become a witch. I'm going to become this. I'm going to become that, whatever it might be, and then end up coming full circle right back to the same thing, because like that programming runs like really deep, and it's why it is that I believe a lot of people have moved away from certain kinds of religion, forms and expressions of religion that are toxic. This can kind of blow your mind. They weren't wrong to move. Like, they weren't wrong to transition. They weren't wrong to change. But the problem was, because in coming out of that toxic religion and coming out of that toxic belief, because there wasn't enough scaffolding, because there wasn't order, because there weren't new practices that were put into place that would ground them, that would tether them in any kind of way, then inevitably, then you end up going all the way back, not only something radical and extreme, but probably something a lot more like you started, because what you end up deciding is that, hey, well, at least when I had toxic beliefs, I still had clarity. At least then I knew who I was. I don't know that I am ready to talk about this, because I feel like I feel like it would be like a whole other thing. I'll try it. How about I try a riff and we'll just see. I'll give, this is an appetizer. This is a teaser for right now. I've seen the way, whether it's in somebody like Thomas Merton, somebody like Richard Rohr, who I revere these folks. But these folks who practice this monastic faith with all of the daily prayers, right, and the confession and the humbling yourself, and there's baptism and there's Eucharist and there's like all these sacramental things. And then later in their journey, they're kind of asking the question of what's the thing beneath the thing that unites us, and they find much more in common, like across traditions with folks of other religions and other expressions, like whatever. But they come to those kinds of conclusions. They're able to see God at work in the world in this broader way through the lens of being deeply practiced within a tradition. They have their own practices. They're deeply rooted in the particularity of their own faith. I think sometimes what people want to do is they want to skip to the punchline, and they want to skip to the kind of like, well, it's all good. It's all God. It's like whatever. They don't have practices. They're not grounded in a particular tradition. And then what ends up happening is that you actually don't get to something that's kind of enlightened and profound and unifying. What you kind of get to is, I think all of this is just kind of the same, and it's not quite really all the same, and you don't really know how to disentangle all of that. It just becomes like a jumble of mush. For some of you, it sounds like I'm doing science fiction right now, but I'm convinced in my soul that somebody knows what I'm talking about. It just becomes a big plate of mush. And it's not that like those kind of mystics are wrong. It's not there's not a thing beneath a thing, and there aren't some experiences that run deeper than words and that can unite us with people who are very different. I just posted the other day about my beautiful relationship with the Imam. But I just think that if you don't have particular practices within a particular tradition, this is one of the reasons why to this moment I am unabashedly and unashamed a Jesus person. Jesus absolutely is the way through which I'm able to make sense of life and the world. And I'm not apologetic about that. And I don't think that being deeply rooted and grounded as a Christian means I need to minimize anybody else's particularity. I don't think it means that everybody else has to be just like me. I don't have to hold anybody else in judgment, but I need some handles in my life. And I'm convinced that everybody needs some handles in your life. Your handles might not be the same as my handles, but you still have to have like some kind of a framework. And you can't go, man, I feel like I'm preaching right now, and I don't know if anybody's feeling it. You can't go from like super rigid structure and framework to I'm just going to kind of burn it all down and then that's all. Because then I actually think it can put you in a much more dangerous position. It's why we have these stories in the Gospels where these spirits are exorcised and people end up worse off than they were before, because in that flattening, in the kind of like burning it all down, they just become so empty and so vapid that then they're open to be controlled by almost anything. Isn't that terrible? Is it terrible that somebody could escape a cult and people can escape cult-like influences and voices? And after you go to all the trouble of getting out of that, it's like you get out of the bunker where they've been storing up for the apocalypse or whatever. Like you finally see daylight. Oh God, only to inevitably adopt something else that's equally restrictive or constrictive and equally terrifying in that way, just because you need some scaffolding. This is why, I didn't mean to do all that. There's got to be something that's not all or nothing in that way. There's got to be a way to leave toxic belief and toxic structures, but then still find some scaffolding that holds some things in place. Brian Zahn and I will be chatting tomorrow. And part of what I love about Brian is I feel like Brian is a person who I've hosted Brian for like prayer schools before. Brian has such a wonderful gift at teaching people how to pray. And I think having some kind of a practice of prayer, a rhythm of prayer, a liturgy in that way, showing up at the same place at the same time, doing the same thing over and over again. Gosh, we need it. We need it because we need to come out of the storm. We need to be able to be grounded. Nicole just said the prosperity gospel, the holistic health pipeline. You said it, I didn't. My wife said it. I endorse it, in fairness. It's a thing. It's a thing. So I don't mean to keep you all day. But can I take you to someplace good and beautiful? Because I don't want to leave it with the pigs drowning in the sea. That's not a great place. I don't feel like to leave us. So verse 14, the swineherds ran off and told it in the city and the country. Then people came to see what it was that happened. Now, I do think this is curious. It's beautiful, but also curious. They came to Jesus and they saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they were afraid. Now, wait a second. So how does this work? How is it that they have seen this person who has been howling at night, cutting himself with stones, crying out, like completely out of control? Jay, thank you for this great note. You can throw your pigs in the sea, but if you don't walk on water, you'll sink with them. Not bad. He said choosy or not bad. I think it's not bad. But they see this man who's howling and out of control, right? They see pure self-destruction. And apparently they weren't afraid of that. Now, why were they not afraid of that? Because I think it's fair to say the townspeople may not have had the same kind of legion but functionally they're used to the chaos. They have the voices in their heads. And on some level, they understand self-destruction. On some level, they understand addiction. On some level, they understand being acted on by forces that are outside of you, or completely given over to impulses within you in a way where you lose control. That made sense to them. So then it's like, well, we've got the town demoniac. What are you going to do? He howls and cuts himself in stones, but hey, like he's a little wild. He's a little out there, but he's our guy. But now they see him clothed in his right mind, in a sound mind, talking with Jesus, and it says they were afraid. See, y'all, this is the thing that I think that happens. If you come out of the storm, really, if you come out of the storm, if in the way that the world feels right now, if you're a person who's crisp and clear, if you're not under the domination of the legion, if you're able to think for yourself, if you're able to think critically about media and about inputs, if you're able to do that kind of work of discernment, if you're not caught up in the crowd that's chanting, crucify him, if you're not caught up in the crowd that is scapegoating and giving away to like these primal energies that just cause them to always be, again, cleansing themselves at somebody else's expense, if you're not caught up in that, if you're calm, if you're clear, if you know who you are, if you know your name, that's the thing that actually will weird people out, because people don't know what to do with somebody. They know what to do when you're in bondage. They know what to do when you're out of control. They don't know what to do sometimes with somebody who's in control because they themselves feel so out of control. But I want to offer that as a kind of invitation today. What if it's possible to be clear? What if it's possible to come out of the storm? What if it's possible to know your own name? To remember it. Great little phrase from Anthony DeMello, behold the one who beholds you smiling. What if it's possible to remember the face that you had before the world was named? What if the world was made? What if it's possible for you to know that you are God's beloved? You're not an instrument. You're not meant to be exploited. You're not meant to be utilized for some kind of ideology, for anybody's ideology. You're a human being with all kinds of beauty and complexity. And you know what? I know it can be really difficult to know how to discern the different voices that are out there, but you can do that, and you get to do that. And you don't need a cult leader. You don't need groupthink. You don't need a guru. You don't need the keys to the universe. You don't need to send me $99.95. You don't need a certificate from my program. To be fully you, to be not in the way, because I know life is always a way of learning to let go, but there's also a way that you kind of get to be in control of your own life and your own journey. There's a way that you get to just not be dictated by the voices that are coming at you at all sides from all around you. Now, in the next few days and weeks, we're going to go a little bit deeper in how that we do that and how we discern those voices and how we tell the difference between information and misinformation, disinformation. How do we discern? How do we operate in that kind of clarity? In the Christian tradition, there's wonderful language for this, and it's a language of the discerning of spirits. That means we're not just paying attention to what the voices say. We're not just paying attention to what we hear. We're also noting how we respond, and we're able to see that with clarity. How is this making me feel? Why is there something inside me? Why is my spidey sense tingling? Or maybe the other way around. Why am I so energized by this in a way that might be a little bit more like the demoniac? It might feel a little like out of control. Why am I enraged all the time? Why am I in constant outrage all the time? What is it that this is doing to me? And to be able to sit back. The man is sitting sane, clothed in his right mind. He's able to think. He's able to reason. He's able to be clear now. You know, he's once again in this. There's a way that in letting go to Jesus, there's a way like in yielding to Jesus, that now he has his own faculties back, where, you know, he can talk. Before, oh man, that might not mean anything to anybody else. That feels like a revelation for me, at least in this moment. Before, he couldn't speak for himself. Before, if you ask him, who are you? My name is Legion, for we are many. Now He's the kind of person who's able to tell you his name. He's able to speak in his own voice. He's able to speak out of his own heart. He's able to speak out of the depths of his own self. He's able to know himself. He's able to know who he is and what he wants and the kind of life that he chooses. Now it's not other voices that speak through him, because he is now grounded and rooted in an identity. He's now got his name back. So whatever this means for you right now, I hope that you can hear this as a kind of invitation to come out of the storm, because I do believe that you have a name. And while I think there's some particularity to that you might need to sit with, I can tell you this much. I do know that your name is God's beloved. I know that your deepest and truest identity is that you are unfathomably, unreasonably, ridiculously loved. And it doesn't matter what anybody else has said to you. It doesn't matter how anybody else has labeled you. It doesn't matter what's been done to you. Your identity is love, and your identity is God's beloved. And you get to be you. You get to come out of the storm. You get to have clarity again. And I think that that's the journey that we can go on together here in these next few days and weeks. So once again, 8 a.m. Monday through Friday on YouTube generally, except Daylight Day when I was still too sick. But generally these are up on YouTube first, and then they're out everywhere else, audio podcasts, like all the things. Can't wait to share the guest and like all that kind of stuff. It's just, it's going to be a really good time. But I hope that you sense something of God's belovedness today. Hope you feel like been able to come out of the storm for just a few minutes. And hopefully in the next few days here, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can critically listen to some of these different voices, and how we can read the information, see the information, how we can get a sense of how we might discern that spiritually in a way that's not hokey, in a way that's very real. So peace to you, my friends. Bonus points, by the way, if anybody know who's on my shirt, because it's a tiny bit obscure. Anybody know? Maybe drop that in the comments. Love to you all. Thanks so much for the time. And please remember that you are God's beloved.